Okay, good morning. Welcome to the 11th. You never know what's going to happen. I put together one of the stools. One of our dream teamers put together the other stool. How much you want to bet this is the one I put together? I'm glad we recorded that. Hey-o. Hey, somebody want to help me out real quick and put this thing back up in a way that's not going to collapse and sever my leg later in the service? That would be swell. Highest setting would be wonderful. Okay, in addition to collapsing furniture, you might also notice that Amber and I have shown up with some hammers. Just give a little hammer kiss there. We had a conversation about how, we shouldn't bonk each other on the head, with the hammer. We shouldn't even pretend because you might accidentally conk each other, and you don't want crazy, unexpected things happening in the service. Are you with me? So already, we know we need to be a little bit careful. Now, the reason that I brought a hammer up with me and the reason that Amber has one in her hand is not because today's team teaching message is going to devolve into violence, okay? That's not what this is about. It's not for protection or anything like that. No, I want you to consider for a moment what a hammer is actually for. If you are in the trades, let me see your hand. If you work in the trades in some way, manly men, manly ladies, yeah, right on. I know what I said. Anyway, I want you to consider the fact that in the hands of a tradesman, this same tool can accomplish two wildly different purposes and objectives, can't it? You can use this tool to build a house, and you can use the same tool to demolish a house. Are you with me? When we do demolition, we're using hammers. When we're doing construction, a jackspade. Oh, it doesn't work. All right. We're just not going to use that today. Whew. Okay, I'm just going to stand. All right. You can use the same tool to accomplish exact opposite goals. You can use it to construct a house. You can use it to tear a house down. The only difference really is how the tool is used, right? The intent and the usage of the person who is wielding it. And listen, I want you to understand this morning that communication is just like this hammer. Communication, healthy communication, has the power to build a relationship, and unhealthy communication has the power to demolish it. Your marriage can rise and fall on the strength of your communication, eh? Your children may go the way they go in life based on the sorts of communication patterns that they hear growing up. In fact, one of the number one complaints that we hear in marriage counseling, whether it's premarital, but often in crisis marriage counseling as well, is couples will come in, they'll sit down on a couch in my office, and they'll say, oh, our communication is so bad. It's like we can't even have a conversation without it devolving into an argument, right? Everything turns into a fight. And so communication, we know its importance. What you may not realize is that the Bible gives us a great deal of emphasis and wisdom on the subject of life-giving communication. Why don't you read for us Ephesians chapter number 4, verse 29.
Yeah, in Ephesians 4:29, it says, "Do not let any destructive talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen."
All right, we're going to read it again
yes,
because
I don't think anybody
was
was
wiggling
listening to me.
and it was weird.
Yeah, okay, let me read that again. "Do not let any destructive talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." Do you see that?
Yeah.
Like the hammer that we're using, it can either destroy or it can build up, just like our words can.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what we want to do today is a little bit different maybe than what we do on a typical Sunday. We want to take some of the communication principles that we would share in a pre-marriage counseling setting. Or if you came in and said, hey, we're struggling, I think it's headed towards divorce, is there anything you can say to make it better? We want to share with you some of the things that we would be talking about in a marriage counseling setting. And I got to tell you, this message today is going to be more workshop than sermon. You just need to know that going in. It's going to be very practical, lots of handles, things that you can apply and really get to work on right away. If you're new to Connect Church and you're like, do they preach the Bible? Yes, we preach the Bible basically every Sunday, but there are these Sundays. I'm out of sorts right now. I'm not even going to lie. After collapsing chairs and stuff, it's just throwing me off. The point is, there are times in which we need to just get insanely practical. Yes. Because I want your marriage to thrive. Yes. More than us wanting your marriage to thrive, God wants your marriage to thrive. Yes. He genuinely wants you to love each other. He wants you to enjoy it when the other person walks through the door. He wants you guys to have a marriage that lasts until death do you part. And so today we're going to focus on these practical communication principles that hopefully will save you from ever having to go to counseling, that hopefully will give you the type of marriage that you've always wanted. Now, if you're here today and you're like, but I'm not even married, so this isn't going to apply to me. Healthy communication principles are the same across the board, no matter the relationship. It doesn't matter if you're not married. These same truths, these same perspectives can help you with your conversation with your kids or your coworkers or your connect group or your family, whatever it might be. And so I'm going to challenge you guys today to lean in. You might want to take some notes, pull out your phone, because I just believe there will be some stuff in here that will help you have the healthy relationship that you really want. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take a form of destructive communication, and then we're going to talk about instead a constructive form. So we'll start with destructive, and then we'll move on and talk about the constructive. So destructive communication is one-way communication. Destructive communication is one way, okay? We are moving downtown. Our moving day is tomorrow, but we've already got possession of our new place, and so we've been down there moving all the small stuff, all the clothes and shoes and all that, and I'm spending more time downtown Calgary than I ever have in my entire life. And you know what I'm learning? There are a ton of one-way streets in that city.
Yes.
Like, do we need that many? Can't we go, like, two ways? I can't even tell you how often I've tried to go east on 4th Street or 4th Ave, whichever it is, and nearly killed myself. And so, like, we understand one-way streets. Traffic only flows in one direction. And I've got to tell you, that is a pretty astute or obvious picture of a lot of communication in marriages, friendships, families, things like that. It's one way, okay? Yeah. We're talking at each other, but not talking with each other. When I say that there is one-way communication going on, you might think to yourself, oh, that means one person is talking, the other person is just sitting there taking it. No, what happens in one-way communication is both of us are talking a whole lot, and neither one of us are listening at all. That's what I mean by one-way communication. Not going from one partner to the other, but instead it's going from both partners at each other, and there's no listening. There's no understanding that's going on between those two things. Most of us think that we are communicating if we get the opportunity to express ourselves. If I get to speak my truth, if I get to tell you how I'm feeling right now, then we are communicating. No, that's venting, okay? And venting can be a good thing. It can be helpful in the right context. Sometimes it's necessary, but it is not communication. Right. One of my favorite quotes in the world is from the playwright George Bernard Shaw. And he said this: the biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it's taken place. The biggest problem in communication is the illusion. I told you what I think right now. I told you how I feel. I gave vent to all my emotions, all my thoughts, all my arguments. Therefore, this has been good communication. No, it has not. It has to be two-way. So I want you to think about communication, true communication, good communication, as happening with the ears and the heart as much as it does with the mind and the mouth. See, when we communicate, we typically use the mind, we use the mouth, and we get our argument across. But if I can go elementary school teacher on you for just a moment, all right? Let me remind you that God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We should be listening. That is the keystone, the cornerstone of healthy two-way communication. We are actually listening to one another as we speak.
Another example of destructive communication can be unspoken expectations, or we like to call this secret contracts.
Come on now.
A secret contract is basically an expectation that you put on a relationship or on a person, but you never communicate that thing. So, like, you have a job and you have an expectation that as I'm working and just going on in the years in this job, I'm going to eventually get promoted. I'm going to get that bigger job. But that's not always the case if you've never communicated that you want that next level job to your boss.
Yeah, right.
This actually happened to me. Has anybody ever worked at the mall, especially during Christmas time? Anybody had a retail job? Crazy. Man, at Christmas, it's crazy. And so I had a college job at Bath & Body Works, and it was seasonal. They hired me just for November and December. But I thought, I'm going to work hard, I'm going to put my head in it, and they're going to keep me. And I was so good, you guys. I was like, have you ever washed your hands without water before? Here's some hand sanitizer.
You were so far ahead of your time. You
yes,
know, now
right?
everybody's like, yeah, hand sanitizer, of course.
And so I really thought that I had this locked in. But the time came, Christmas had passed, and they let me go. They were like, oh, we didn't know you wanted to stay. We already filled all those positions. I had a secret contract with that boss. Or this can happen, you're raised in a home where the mom cooks and cleans and dinner's on the table as soon as the husband gets home. And so maybe you developed an expectation, a secret contract on your spouse that you never communicated that before marriage, but all of a sudden dinner's not on the table and you're like, what's going on? Or this can happen in church.
Oh, yeah.
You start serving on the team and you're like, I'm going to get her attention. She's going to notice me. We're going to start dating because I'm all in. Or I'm going to start serving so that I can be seen. So that I can get a platform, so I can speak my truth, my word, what God told me to say. Listen, some of those things might be true and good, and God has intention for it, but if you're not communicating that to leadership, you're going to walk out of here, you're going to leave the church because your expectation was never met.
Ooh, now she's just meddling in stuff that's not her business, all right? I mean, no, listen, she's absolutely right. Having expectations, having desires on anyone else is not necessarily bad, but having an unspoken expectation on somebody is always bad.
Right.
Healthy communication requires you to articulate what you expect of your friend, your mom, your spouse, whatever it might be. And so it's got to be this two-way form of communication. In fact, if we say destructive communication is only one way, then the destructive communication is only one way, then the constructive form, of course, is going to be two ways. It is going to listen as much as it speaks. And when it listens, it's going to listen with the intent of understanding and not replying. You with me? It's what Stephen Covey said. Most people listen only with the intention of replying. As you're talking, I'm already formulating my counter argument. But no, healthy communication listens with the purpose of understanding. When it comes to fighting and conflict resolution, healthy communication seeks to solve the conflict and not win the argument. You can win the argument and lose the war, brother. It ain't worth it, okay?
Right.
You want to solve the conflict. You don't want to win the argument. There has to be this two-way, healthy communication if you want your marriage, your relationship, friendship to thrive. So what we want to do is we want to give you a few of the principles and exercises that we would actually walk couples through in a premarital counseling session. These are not new. You've probably heard of all of these before. The problem is not our lack of knowledge. The problem is our lack of applying the knowledge that we have. So I want to remind you of some healthy ways that you can communicate, some constructive dialogue that you can begin to develop with you and other people in your life. So we might start with reflective listening. Reflective listening. So that's when somebody tells us what they're experiencing, what they're feeling, they're sharing their truth with us, instead of simply arguing right away, getting defensive or bringing in the counterpoint. We're going to say, okay, what I hear you saying in the moment is, and then we repeat what this person, we think they're saying anyway. And this gives them the opportunity to say, no, where did you get that, knucklehead? That is not what I'm saying. I don't understand how you're still missing the boat here. Let me see if I can clarify. So it gives them the opportunity to fix any miscommunication that's going on. But the other thing is, it really does provide the person who's sharing with you the opportunity to at least be heard, perhaps even to be validated. At least they leave a conversation saying, okay, they know how I feel. We may not have come to an agreement, but at least they do understand what I'm trying to say here in the moment. Let me give you an example that, is not based on any particular marriage or anything like that. This is just, something that I've seen happen in some relationships. So maybe the wife comes in and she says, it drives me crazy when you do not pick your dirty clothes up off the floor. Like, why is it? There's a hamper right there. Why can your socks not get from here over there to the hamper? Again, I just feel like this is probably an issue in some marriage, okay? Now, if the husband is committed to destructive communication, okay? When the wife says, man, why are your socks on the floor again? Destructive communication would be like, what are you talking about? I shovel snow, I walk the dog, I take the trash out. You don't see anything that I do around here. You see how now we're talking at each other. We ain't talking with each other. It's not the same conversation that we're having, right? So instead, if I'm going to practice reflective, did I just say that in the first person as if like I've betrayed the fact that this is our problem? Anyway, if I'm going to, I'll own it. If I'm going to practice reflective listening, I would say, babe, I understand that you're upset with me yet again because my socks are on the floor and not in the hamper. Now, I want you to notice here, I have not said, this is the dumbest thing we could argue about. Are you kidding me? Who cares if there's a pair of socks on the floor? They'll get picked up at some point today, you know? My feet were hot and sweaty. I wanted to take out my socks. Leave me alone, girl. I didn't get into all that. I didn't say like, okay, we're all on the same page now or anything like that. Reflective listening is not going to solve a problem in and of itself. But you know what it does? It has the power to set us in the right direction.
Yes.
Instead of immediately defending and fighting and taking this aggressive posture towards one another, at least I can say, I understand where you're coming from. I at least understand that. Now we can start to work towards a better solution. So reflective listening is one thing I would encourage you to practice. The second is to make use of I statements instead of you statements, right? You've heard this before. Our tendency in a relationship, especially when we're upset with somebody, is like, you, point the finger. It's always second person. I had an old pastor that used to say, every time you point one finger at a person, you're pointing three fingers back at yourself. Are you with me? And so when we refuse to acknowledge ourselves, when we constantly say, you're the problem, you're the reason that this is happening, how many times do I have to tell you? You know, when we point the finger and talk second person accusative at somebody, then we are setting ourselves up for dysfunctional communication, right, is really what it comes down to. So instead, what we want to make use of is I statements, okay? Right. This is how I'm feeling when this happens, when you do this, when we find ourselves having this conversation yet again, this is how it makes me feel. And so like maybe to keep the dirty laundry example going, but this time we'll put it in the context of a mom and her kid. You know, you might go to your kid and you could, point your finger and yell at him and man, you never listen, you're so disobedient and all of that. Or you could say, when you don't put your clothes in the laundry, it really makes it feel like you're not listening to me. I feel like you don't respect me, you don't care what I have to say, and immediately now that sets up a different sort of conversation than you're the problem. This is your issue. You know what I mean? It's like, here's what I'm feeling, what I'm receiving, what's happening to me in the moment. And it just softens the conversation and it sets it up in such a way that we could potentially start to move forward instead of, immediately going into conflict.
I think a really important thing that you just said here is that you need to express the feeling and the why behind what you're feeling. Like, instead of just being angry and yelling about it, especially to your children, because that's an example that you're setting for their future family. But if you go to them and say, this just really breaks my heart, or it really upsets me, or I don't understand why, but it hurts my feelings, when you're not listening to me, I feel like you're not listening to me. The feelings behind it give it a different meaning. And so he might not understand why it makes me upset to put the socks on the floor. But if I'm expressing, this really bugs me that we have this conversation and I feel like you don't hear me. Mm-hmm. That puts a different meaning behind it.
It does, and I might be willing to work on some things because I don't want to hurt her. That's not what I'm after, right? I don't think the socks are a big deal, but if she's consistently expressing to me that this feels disrespectful or this feels like I just don't care about her, then, well, that's not what I want her to feel and think. And so I might be willing to give here. So it's about framing. It's about, speaking from this first person instead of second person perspective. And then the final practical thing I might challenge you to do when it comes to constructive communication is to get rid of the words never and always.
Yes.
Just get rid of them, okay?
That's right.
Don't use them because they're never and always true. You with me? It's like if you go to your spouse and you say, you never pick your socks up off the floor. They are always on the floor. There's a pile of clothes every day. All I have to do is come up with one time that I actually put the socks in the hamper, and boom, I just won this round of the argument, okay? You with me? So now it's like, you didn't even see when I did it last week. You don't even pay attention. You don't even know what you're talking about right now, right? So never and always, those are exaggerated words. They're not true. They don't never do that. They don't always do that. So instead, we might say, listen, way more often than not, your socks end up on the floor instead of in the hamper. Can we do something about that? Do you understand why that bothers me so much? So we're framing this in a way that doesn't set us up for conflict and fighting and arguing and things like that. We're trying to get moving in the right direction so that we can cooperate for a solution instead of trying to win an argument. Yes. Destructive communication, it really does flow one way, but constructive communication flows two ways. Let's move on to the next one here. Destructive communication assumes the worst. Destructive communication assumes the worst. Our default kind of mode of operating is to impute the worst possible motive and goal and purpose to our spouse's behavior and actions. I don't know why that is. It's like we should be believing the best. This should be the person that I just always believe the best about, but instead I tend to assume the worst. So maybe Hubs is sitting on the couch, and this really isn't our thing. This is just a general example. Hubs is sitting on the couch, wife walks by, and so she notices he's got the text message app open. And she's like, oh, who you texting? And he's like, what, you don't trust me? You think this is my secret girlfriend? Why is it you have to know who I'm texting right now? It's like, you're assuming the worst possible reason for her asking the question. She's like, dude, pump the brakes. I was just asking who you were talking to. I was curious. It's not that big of a deal. We have this tendency to give the worst possible explanation of what our spouse or our partner says or does, and it causes all sorts of problems that don't really need to be there. You know where this really comes up? Text messages. Okay, if you've been married for a while, you've been with your partner for a while, they send you a text message. How many of you guys know that you can read the tone in that text message? Except you can't. That's a lie. You're assuming you know how they're saying it. You don't know. And so if we read sarcasm, anger, frustration, whatever it might be, if we read that into the text message, then we're already going to be responding in a way that doesn't need to happen. So here's what you need to do. You need to ask yourself in the moment, what is the best possible explanation I could give to my spouse and their words or their actions right now? What is the best possible way to read this or understand it? And then until they give you some reason to believe that they actually were being sarcastic or being, duplicitous or whatever the case may be, I'm just going to believe the best. That's the way I'm going to choose to approach my relationship with my spouse.
And I just want to add to that we have an open, trusting relationship where we have access to each other's devices. Mm-hmm. We know each other's passwords fully and completely. There's nothing hidden. And I truly believe that is the most healthy way. If you are in such a close relationship that you are married, they should have access. There should be nothing on your phone that is hidden. Right? Are you with me?
Just for real, like you've committed your life to this person. Y'all share a bank account and stuff like that, but you can't share iPhone password?
If there is something on your phone that you cannot share with your spouse, there is a deeper conversation that needs to be had. Because if I can't share this, then how am I going to share my heart? How am I going to share what God is doing in my life and what he's working on with me and what I need to confess and open up about? I'm never going to do that if I can't even open up my device and share it with them.
Yeah, so good. Got another one?
Yeah, I do.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so another thing that we can mess up is assuming that person is like my current person or my past person. Yeah. Sorry, I said that bad. Let me rephrase that. Like, we can really mess this up when we assume that our current partner or spouse is like a past relationship. Mm-hmm. And we really see this when somebody's been married before and then gets married again, because that's a really long-term relationship, a very committed relationship. And they went through the assuming the worst, and I can read your mind with just looking at you. And they're assuming that person, the way they did things, the things that ticked them off and set them off, and the always and the nevers, those are going to be the same in the new relationship.
Yeah. You know what you can't do? You can't hold your current partner accountable for your past partner's sins. Right. And that's really what she's talking about here. It's like they cheated on you, so you don't trust this person now. Why? That person didn't cheat on you. You know, if your past partner, your wife just had trouble spending, like she just spent way more money than she should. If your new partner one day comes home and she bought something that hadn't been budgeted and stuff, you can respond in this moment with all of the pain and undealt with baggage that you still carry around from the last one. That's not fair to her, though. And so we've got to be careful that we don't assume this person is like that person. And of course, it goes beyond just marriage relationships.
You can see this in everyday life at your job. My old boss is not the same as my new boss, right? So I can't put the same assumptions on them. Especially in churches. Your new pastor is not the same as your old pastor. Your church, the people that are in your church are not the same as the people who are in your old church. Come on.
Yeah, it's so good.
There can't be assumptions. You can't assume the worst about the people in your life. You need to assume the best.
So when we were writing out this message, I included this next little section, and I put a note on our shared Google Doc, and I was like, maybe we'll get to this if we have time. I don't know. And Amber was like, no, this is important. You're going to tell this. And I'm like, all right, here we go. Okay. So one of the ways that I tend to assume the worst, or I tend to bring the worst possible perspective to a solution, or a situation rather, is that let's say I have something that I want to tell Amber, okay? And I know she may not love hearing it for one reason or another. After you've been married for 18 years, you've been together for 20 years, like, you really know each other pretty darn well. Are you with me? Like, at this point, we can fairly accurately predict how conversations are going to go in our marriage. I just know if I say this, Amber's probably going to say that. So then I'm going to say this, then she's going to say that. It's like we fall into the same communication patterns time and time again. So it's not that surprising that after a couple of decades of being together, you really know how one another's going to respond. So here's how I get this wrong all the time. I'm thinking, okay, later tonight, I need to let Amber know that. And then I know Amber's going to say this, so then I guess I'll respond by saying that. And then she'll respond probably this way, and I can fairly well game out how a conversation is going to go. Amber can do the same thing, again, just because we've been together for so long. What happens, though, is I'll go like a chess game, man. I'm 8 moves deep in this conversation before I ever have a talk with her. I see how it's likely to end up. So when we come home and I tell her round 1 what's going on, I get frustrated with her that she's not immediately at round 8 and see where this thing is going. And I'm like, come on, why don't you see this already? And she's like, you've been thinking about this all day. You just dropped this on me. I need to process this. We got to work it out. Let's have the conversation.
This escalated really quickly. How did you get there?
So what happens is, like, I'm like, okay, I know she's going to say this, and it gets under my skin. So then I'm going to have to say this again, and then she's going to say this. And so by the time we have the opening volley of conversation, I'm already at a level 5 frustration, you know? And she's like, why are you so worked up right now? We just started talking. And it's because in my mind, I've already assumed that this conversation is going to go badly. I don't know that. Right. That's an unfair thing to saddle my wife with. She may not respond the way that I think she will. She may respond so much better. And so I need to give her the benefit of the doubt instead of assuming the worst. So destructive communication, it really does assume the worst. Then constructive communication, it believes the best. It believes the best about our spouse. Rather than jumping in with the worst possible expectation or interpretation, ask yourself, what's the best possible light I can put this in?
And I think that something that's really dangerous when we're having these secret conversations in our heads and we're just assuming how it goes, it's even more destructive when we add action to it. So I know that they're not going to like that thing that I buy. If we have this conversation about budget, they're just going to tell me no. So I'm going to go buy it anyway. And then what are they going to do? Return it?
Forgiveness versus permission, that whole thing, yeah.
Or I know that they're not going to want to go out with that couple or go to that event or that concert or whatever, but I really want to go. And so instead of having this conversation, I'm just going to buy the tickets and we're going to go. Right?
Yeah.
It might feel like we're reading your mail right now, but we've been married for almost 18 years. We understand. Yeah. Like, we've been through this, but there's a process and there's a reason that healthy communication is what God has given us and structured us for. Yeah. And so we need to talk about it.
We really want to believe the best. And I got to tell you, ultimately, this is not just self-help. I mean, there's a spiritual component to this, you guys. This comes down to speaking prophetically about your spouse, building them into the person that God wants them to be rather than the person that they are today. There's just something to this. Now, listen, if you're a Baptist and you're like, that sounds like Pentecostal nonsense, no. There is a way in which you can speak over the people in your life that will call them into who God wants them to be. Yes. And if you're a Pentecostal and you're like, all right, well, I'm just going to speak a Lambo into my driveway. No, that's not how it works either, okay? So, like, there is a way. People tend to become what others say about them. It's just how it is. And so if your spouse is constantly saying you're dumb, you're an idiot, guess what? You're going to start to believe that about yourself. But if your spouse is saying, I care about you, I believe the best in you, I think we can get through this together, they will start to assume that that is the truth. And so it really does come down to speaking prophetically. We could even summarize it like this. Your words are either building the person that you want to be married to, or they're tearing down the person you have to be married to.
Wow.
That's what it is.
Wow.
Your words are building them up, construction, or they are tearing them down. It's demolishing. And so we want to speak life to one another rather than simply assuming the worst.
This is also practical if you have a family, if you have children. It's better to speak life into that child, to speak prophetically into that child and speak positively instead of tearing them down.
Yeah, so true.
Instead of, why are you always bullying your brother? You are such a bully. And put him in the corner. Maybe it's better to be like, hey, I see that you love so deeply. I know that you're a loving boy. Can we also share that love with your brother? Do you see what I did there? Like, it's not, I'm tearing him down and I'm telling him the negative things that he's doing. But instead, I'm building him up and speaking into what I would like to see more of. He is loving, right? But we need to speak that life into him to help raise him up and to see that. Because when you're speaking that over him, then he wants to do those things.
Yeah. So destructive communication assumes the worst. Constructive communication believes the best. Let me give you another one here. Destructive communication believes everyone thinks like me. Everyone thinks they process information the same way. They make decisions the same way. Here's what ends up happening. We have premarital counseling sessions, and a couple will be sitting upstairs in my office, and I'm like, so talk to me about your decision-making process. And inevitably, one of them will be like, oh, she is so different from me. Like, she is just a planner, Like, every time we want to go on a trip, there's a spreadsheet and a full itinerary. I love that. That is so awesome. She just, like me, I just fly by the seat of my pants and stuff. But I love having somebody who's looking out for us and planning all the details and stuff. And you do love it for about 2 years. And then after that, you're like, this lady is driving me crazy. Can we not just go and see and experience life as it happens? So what ends up happening is that we assume everybody thinks the same way we do, processes information, makes decisions, and all that sort of stuff. And we can be attracted to the difference for a while, and then eventually that's the sort of stuff that's going to drive us crazy. So if we remind ourselves consistently, okay, they don't think the way that I do. They don't have the same personality. They don't decide the same way. Then when there is this difference, it's not a surprise, it's not a shock, and it's less of a frustration. Even like outside of marriage, we know that people process and communicate differently. We could talk about Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram, your personal favorite, the DISC assessment, True Colors, like whatever typing tool you want to use. The point is, there are different kinds of people. And they communicate, and they decide, and they interact in all sorts of different ways. And listen, none of those are better than any others.
Right.
Like, I'd like to tell you that the 9 is the crown of the Enneagram, all right? It is the best number there is. Amber would say, that's nonsense, all right? None of them's any better. And so we recognize, all right, not everybody thinks like me. That's a destructive way. Not only that, but can I remind you that research shows us that the majority of communication that happens is not actually verbal.
Right.
The majority of communication isn't really about the words that you choose, okay? So there have been a lot of studies that have been done, and the numbers might be a little bit different here and there, but like one research study in particular showed that 7% of your meaning is conveyed by your words. 7% is conveyed by your words, okay? 38% is conveyed by the tone in which you speak those words, and 55% is conveyed by your body language.
Wow.
Oh, that's nuts, man. That is completely the opposite of what you might expect. So knowing that can help. Let me share with you how this played out in our marriage this week. So we're at our new place, and like we're starting to move over a lot of small stuff. And of course, we're buying new furniture and all that jazz. And so like we're putting together the IKEA stuff. I'm over here in this corner. Amber bought this water filter that she's very excited about. She's got all the pieces, and she's trying to fit them together. And I'm like really busy over here doing my thing. And she's like, I got this. Don't worry. I got instructions and YouTube videos. I'm good over here. But I start to notice she's getting increasingly frustrated on this end of the kitchen, right? Huffing and puffing and all those things. And I'm over here, and I'm like, I got to get this done. I really don't need to go over there and help her. Plus, she said she got it, so I'm just going to believe the best about her. And so finally, she looks over at me, and I'm telling you in the sweetest voice I have ever heard her use. She says, can you help me? And I said, I'd love to help you. Except I didn't say it that way. What I actually said was, I'd love to help you. And so I went over there and helped her. No, I said the right thing. The problem is I said it the wrong way. 7% ain't enough to communicate. It's not good. It's not healthy. It's not right. 93% of it is how you say it with your tone and your body. And so rather than just assuming that like I can just say what I want to say, how I want to say it, and they should understand, that's just not how the world works. Right. We are different. And so we've got to recognize not everyone believes and thinks the way that we do. So instead of that, constructive communication is willing to learn your partner. Willing to learn your partner. 1 Peter chapter number 3, verse 7. We're not going to put this verse on the screen. I just want you to hear it. It says this, in the same way, husbands, give honor to your wives, treat your wife with understanding as you live together. Some translations say, dwell with her according to knowledge. Get to know her, what works, what doesn't work, what sets her off, what makes her feel cherished. Dwell with her according to knowledge and communicate in such a way that honors who she is and who she's becoming. When you guys first got together, you were like the world's foremost expert on your partner. You with me? I was the world's expert on Amber when we first got together. And I probably am today, but the truth is that when we first started dating, man, it was like I had discovered a treasure. Are you with me? I wanted to know everything about her. Babe, tell me everything you could possibly think. Keep giving. I just want to know. I pursued her, right? Over time, that kind of wanes a little bit in any relationship. Doesn't mean you're falling out of love, but it's like you kind of learn most of the stuff there is to learn at that point and things like that. We've got to continue to pursue one another, continue to learn our partner, because, hey, partners are constantly changing. Do you realize that? Partners are constantly changing. People come into our office and they say, oh, this is not the lady I married. No, it's not the lady you married. You've been together for like 11 years, man. Do you want her to stay the same? Do you want to be married to somebody who has the emotional intelligence of a 20-year-old? No, you want them to change. I'm not trying to be, I'm just saying this is real. Your partner changes over time. I said in the first service, Amber's been married to 4 different guys. And they're all me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've changed. I've become different as the years pass. That shouldn't be surprising, and it shouldn't be a source of frustration. If she's willing to learn who I'm becoming and to take that journey with me, and vice versa. Remember, we talked about the triangle, both in the couple growing together in their pursuit of God and who God's called them to be. As long as we're both doing that together, this is a good, right, and healthy dynamic. We've got to be willing to learn our partners.
You know how we know this is true? We see this in our family dynamic. Have you ever heard somebody who's like really struggling with their finances and they're like, I just can't move back in with my parents. Like, that will not go well. Why is that? Why is it not going to go well? It's because the parents see them as the young person that they know and love, but have not seen them as the person they've grown into. So they don't know them the same. And so they know all of the mistakes they made in high school, all of the things they did as a child, and they're going to treat them like that. And so that's why it's really difficult to move back into your home and childhood home. So it's really important for us to allow grace and allow the person to grow into who God is making them.
Yeah.
Right?
And so when we talk about learning our partner, one of the most helpful things, and we're going to give a shout out to a book here, it's a little old, but that's okay because I still think it has a lot of wisdom to offer, is the 5 Love Languages book. If you're not familiar with that concept, I would encourage you to read it. Look, it's not going to solve all your marital problems or anything like that, but it is a very helpful way to recognize that you give and receive love differently than your spouse does, right? Like, how does this play out for me and you? Because we have completely different love languages.
We're complete opposites. So I love by giving gifts, and I feel love by receiving gifts, and I love physical touch. That's a feeling of love that I have. Maybe it's why I'm a massage therapist. And yeah, it's just part of how I love. And yours are completely opposite. Yours are acts of service and words of affirmation.
Yeah, they are.
And those are the 2 things that I'm worst at.
Yeah, and look, the 2 things that she wants most tend to be the ones that I score the lowest at. And so recognizing that, hey, my spouse gets their bucket filled when I bring them a small gift. Like, if you brought me a bouquet of flowers, okay? Honestly, they would go straight in the trash. I'm not even going to lie.
I
don't get it.
No.
I don't understand it, okay? But that's so meaningful to her, right? And so understanding that means that even if it doesn't really fill my bucket, I know it fills hers. So I am going to love her the way that she will feel it and not the way that I will feel it. Another way that I get love languages wrong, man, I'm just airing all the laundry today, all right? Another way that I get love languages wrong is that because I want words of affirmation. So I'll go to her and I'll say, babe, you look so good today. Like, you just look great. And I'm proud of you. I want you to know you're crushing it. You're just doing such a good job. And I'm just glad we get to do this together. Like, I'm proud of you. And she's like, thank you. And I'm like, secret contract, unspoken expectation. I thought you were going to reciprocate. And so look, healthy communication then would be me going to her and saying, hey, sweetheart, I know you love me. It would be helpful to hear it a little more often. I know you're proud of me. Could you just tell me every so often? Like, I need somebody to be like championing me and reminding me that I'm doing a good job and that sort of thing, right? And so it's a helpful thing. It's a great tool when it's used in the right way. Okay, we got to wrap this thing up real quick. Final form of destructive and constructive communication. Destructive communication gossips to those who cannot change your spouse. Gossips to those who cannot change your spouse. So maybe it's a friend Maybe it's your mom. Maybe it's, ladies in your connect group or guys in your connect group. And we're sharing details that should not be shared. And we're expressing and venting frustration that this person has no ability to solve. I understand you need a safe place to talk about things. I get that, okay? But there is a way in which we do this that is very, very hurtful and destructive. Like Genesis chapter number 2, verse 24 says that when people get married, a man leaves his father and mother, and he is glued, united to his wife. The truth is, there are a lot of people that never left mom and dad. They still rely on mom and dad for their validation, for their financial help, for their love, for their wisdom, whatever it might be. And I am certainly not telling you to cut your family or your friends out, but don't ever compromise your relationship with your spouse by venting to people who have no ability to change it. It happens all the time. It's like, the wife will say, he just tells his mom like all these horrible things I do. I know she doesn't like me because he just tells her all the bad stuff. Every fight we have, he picks up the phone and he calls his mom. She can't respect me if all she hears is the bad. And he doesn't pick up the phone and say, oh, mom, we made up. All that's put to bed. Everything's good now. No, he just moves on. And so all she hears is the negative. That is a very destructive way to communicate and to receive the help that you might need from your spouse.
It's also really difficult. Like, I'm sure you've been in this social situation where somebody comes in and they just start ripping apart their spouse in front of them. Like, they're right there in the room, and it's a passive-aggressive way to have an argument without having an argument. And it's obvious to the entire room that this couple struggles with having clear communication, healthy communication. And it's awkward, you guys.
It is.
The best thing you can do is to work on these communication skills. We all need them.
Yeah.
We all struggle in certain areas, but it is the worst thing to go berate your spouse or your loved one in front of other people. That's not respectful. It makes other people think less of you, not them.
Ooh,
right?
Right. Destructive communication gossips to those who cannot change things. Constructive communication prays to the one who can. Constructive communication prays to the one who really can change things. Can I remind you that in the Bible, God is the one who's called the Wonderful Counselor? Wouldn't it be great to have a wonderful counselor? I hear from people all the time, like, I cannot find a good counselor. You have the Wonderful Counselor if you're a follower of Jesus. And the scripture tells us that the Wonderful Counselor's job is to convict and change people. That means, fellas, it's not your job to convict and change your wife. There may be some things that she needs to work on, but it's not your job to change her. It's your job to entrust her to the one who truly can change her. Ladies, it's not your job to change your husband, okay? It is your job to commit him to the one who can change. So can I tell you the most important thing that you can do for your spouse is to pray for them every day. The most helpful communication tip I can give you is to pray for your spouse every single day. They might need counseling. They might need anger management. They might need some medication. They might need a time apart for a weekend or something. All of that is true. But the best thing you can do for them is to pray for them every single day. Proverbs 18:21 says this: the tongue has the power of life and death. It has the power to construct the kind of relationships that you want. Has the power to kill them as well. And so the Bible reminds us that those who love words, those who love the tongue for good and for bad, will reap the rewards. They'll eat the fruit. So our job is to communicate in such a way that builds the marriage we want to have, that honors the God that gave us the gift of a spouse in the first place. Let's communicate in ways that are constructive and not destructive to our spouses.